Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of the Sacred Heart Province, headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, and I am also the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. This Sunday marks a change for us. Last Sunday was the culmination of the liturgical year. This Sunday, we begin anew. We begin by going back to the beginning and following Jesus through his birth, his passion, his resurrection, his ascension, and we will consider the cost of discipleship. We will do this using St. Luke's Gospel, the Gospel that is highlighted in the C cycle of the Lectionary for Mass. St. Luke's Gospel is considerably different than the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, the Gospels that we used for the A and B cycle, respectively. St. Luke was a Gentile, and as such, he was used to being an outsider. As an outsider, he was not privileged to be among those who followed Jesus from the outset. He learned of Jesus through the words of another, and he tells us at the very beginning of his gospel that he is recording what he has heard, not what he has seen. But he records it with the perspective of someone who has not been on the inside, but rather someone who has been on the outside looking in. Rather than showing Jesus as the lawgiver or as a teacher, he portrays Jesus as the compassionate embodiment of God's love, a love that extends not simply to the chosen people, but to people of every race and nation. As we listen to the Gospel of St. Luke today, even though his Gospel is considerably different, it will sound very familiar. Jesus said to his disciples, "There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on earth nations will be in dismay, perplexed by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will die of fright in anticipation of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. But when these signs begin to happen, stand erect and raise your heads, because your redemption is at hand. Beware that your hearts do not become drowsy from carousing and drunkenness and the anxieties of daily life, and that day catch you by surprise like a trap. For that day will assault everyone who lives on the face of the earth. Be vigilant at all times, and pray that you have the strength to escape the tribulations that are imminent and to stand before the Son of Man." Scholars will attest to the fact that Luke lifted much of this material right out of the Gospel of St. Mark. As a matter of fact, we heard many of these words just 2 weeks ago on the 33rd Sunday of Ordinary Time. However, Luke has that different perspective. And the perspective changes here because of the time in which Luke's Gospel was written. At least a full 15 years after the Gospel of St. Mark appeared, Luke began to record his version of the Gospel. And in that 15-year period, things had changed. First of all, people began to wonder whether Jesus really would return as he had promised. You might recall that the early Christians believed that Jesus would return very soon after returning to the Father. However, years have gone by. We are now at least 55 years after Jesus returned to the Father. And as a result, people have become complacent. They have begun to become a little bit unwary, unready. St. Luke actually mentions a few things that have been distractions for these people when he talks about carousing and drunkenness. For those of us who live in the Western world, for Americans, we might even chuckle a little bit when we hear these words, knowing that in our own society, the party life is held up as something to be emulated and to be chased after. Luke warns the Christians of his time not to be complacent, but to be ready. And in this, he is proclaiming a very true perspective of Jesus. Hundreds of years later, Shakespeare would write, "The readiness is all." This is certainly Luke's perspective in the Gospel for this first Sunday in Advent. As we look forward to the return of Jesus, we prepare ourselves. We stand alert. We stand erect, waiting for the Lord. Unfortunately, for those of us who live in the northern climate, this is the time of the year when we think of hibernating, of wrapping ourselves in afghans and quilts, lying down before a roaring fire, and enjoying the warmth and security of our homes. This is exactly the kind of attitude that Luke is warning us against. This is not a time for hibernation. This is a time for readiness. For more information about CUSA, please visit our website at www.qson.org.